building a better Bay Area for a safe and secure future. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. Welcome to our daily program called Getting Answers. We're asking experts your question every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. All this week, ABC 7 News, Building a Better Bay Area, is focusing on education. Now, in a little bit, we'll talk with the president of CSU East Bay about reopening colleges. But first, we want to get caught up on everything COVID-19 related. So ABC 7 News special correspondent, Dr. Alok Patel, is just the person to do that with us. Dr. Patel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kristen.
All right, 2 thumbs up. Let's start with schools, specifically the waiver program we heard about this week being rolled out by the state, saying elementary schools in counties on the watch list can apply for a waiver to reopen in person if their caseload is less than double what it takes to get on the watch list. Tell me if my math is wrong, but what are your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, your math is correct, because the case rate they're looking for is less than 200 per 100,000, so you're spot on. But you know, one thing that's reassuring about California's waiver program for elementary schools is it's extensive. I actually looked it over this morning, and not only do schools have to provide proof that they have a lot of variables under control, like cleaning, disinfection, staff training, contact tracing, all these in process. They have to prove that they've been talking to parent, labor, and community organizations. And even after all of that, local health officials will still look at that specific county and make sure that it's safe for kids to return. So I think it's reassuring. It should be reassuring to everyone, including parents and teachers, that there's a lot of factors going into making sure an elementary school that's K through 6 can go back to in-person learning in specific counties.
I think those guidelines, too, also said something about sports, right? And I'm seeing a question from our viewer, Scott Futch, about whether sports will be closed. I mean, I know athletics, we're talking mainly about high schoolers, and these waivers would apply to elementary schools. But talk a little bit about what the governor said with regard to sports and PE and physical activity.
Right, so I skipped over, obviously, a lot of details in the waiver, and one of them does involve sports. And there's specific guidance about sports that may require some physical contact versus something that you can physically distance. And, you know, depending on the county and depending on the specific school, some sports, I mean, you think about the difference between swimming versus track and field versus soccer. And some sports might not be allowed, or basketball, which requires, you know, people are going to be touching the same ball, obviously, unless you're playing some funky version of multiple ball basketball. And so some sports may not come back right away.
Yeah, that is true. And I know that's devastating for a lot of high school athletes, but that is the world we live in right now. I'm seeing, you know, a plea from someone named Joseph saying, please open schools. Now, I get where he's coming from. I know many parents want to see their kids learn in person and be with their friends and see their teachers in that classroom setting. But I got to ask you, as more and more parents in the Bay Area start to explore the pod concept, what are the health warnings that you might give to them who are considering that model?
Well, first of all, I agree with that, the sentiment that we should strive to get in-person learning back, obviously as safe as possible. Now, learning pods can be beneficial. Again, it comes down to behavior. If people are really responsible about it, if you have the same group, you know, that you're trusting, and you essentially have a quarantine, and you know that everyone is monitoring their exposures, and that includes any type of in-person tutor you may have, that can be a safe option. One thing that we're going to have to explore is a potential disparity, because that, again, is not accessible to everyone. Not everyone has the space for learning pods or the resources to be able to support that. So I think there needs to be different variations of a learning pod environment for every single person, regardless of their resources.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, right, if you talk about if you did do the pod because you can afford to and you can have that kind of setup, let's say you're exposed to only 5 kids instead of, say, the 300 you might at school, that should bring your exposure down quite a bit. But the warning, isn't it, always, what if each of those 5 people also have like 5 other groups that are going? And this is where my math can't keep up, but that becomes exponential, the risk.
It's the same analogy as when we talked to people about whether or not they could have a dinner party, or they could have their friends over to watch a movie. And they say, well, I trust my 5 friends. It's the exact same situation with the learning pod. You have to look at their exposure when they're not specifically in your home learning, or they're not at your dinner party. And that's where trust comes into play. And a smaller amount of people obviously does mean that you can control the exposures more, you can control your environment more, you might be able to set up better ventilation, more physical distancing. There's a lot of things that are at your disposal.
A lot of people are afraid because, you know, some other states have opened some of their schools already. In Georgia, we saw just this week, I mean, you know, they've been pretty aggressive about reopening and promoting fewer restrictions. But we saw pictures of their schools, you know, kids not wearing their masks in busy hallways in a high school. And now we're hearing that in one school district, 90 staff members are having to quarantine now due to exposure. I just want to ask you, that cannot happen here in California, right? I mean, given the mask mandate that we have and given the rules and guidelines that you were talking about that were pretty detailed with regard to spacing, contact tracing, that could not happen here, right?
I don't think it would. You know, I think it speaks to kind of the different types of guidelines or public health benchmarks you're seeing. And it's unfortunate that it varies so much from state to state. California's waiver process, as we just mentioned, has pretty detailed guidelines, which I think should pose no surprise for students or parents. But there's some places, Georgia, Arizona, where the guidelines are a little bit looser. And I've even heard from teachers myself that they are going back to schools where there functionally aren't any limitations and masks are optional. That is not a great scenario. That's literally a setup for more outbreaks.
All right, well, let's get into the heart of the matter, the truth, if you will, as best we know it, about kids and COVID, right? Because we heard a lot about how kids under 10 may be less susceptible and less of a vector, if you will, for carrying this, you know, disease, transmitting it. You saw the president's video, though, that was taken down by Twitter, and they suspended the account until they took off that video in which he said that children are pretty much practically immune to COVID. Now, a lot of people hope that is the case. Certainly parents hope so. But what do we know? What does the data tell us right now?
Well, first of all, the data tells us that's not true. The kids are not immune to COVID-19. We actually don't understand a lot about natural immunity to the virus, so completely misleading and potentially dangerous statement because that might give people false hope or make people think that their kids are never going to get sick from it. We know that kids can get hospitalized, they can get a severe illness. We've had a few kids die even. Now, you're correct that the data so far suggests that young children, are less likely to get a severe illness. That doesn't mean they can't carry the virus. And they can potentially spread it to other students, parents, teachers, vendors, anyone else in their community. And older kids, we've seen in a few studies, can spread it almost at the same rate as adults do, even if they're less likely to get hospitalized. And one other variable I got to throw out there, for the past 6 months or so, schools have been shut down, well, some schools have been, and there's a summer vacation. So let's say kids have been getting sick 1/5 of the time. I'm making that number up. We're about to potentially reopen schools and increase their exposure. So whatever low rate of transmission we've seen in children could potentially increase by a major magnitude. So there are a lot of unknowns. It is not safe at all to think that kids are immune. We still have to protect them.
All right, as you know, most Bay Area schools are starting with distance learning for the fall. But do you have much hope that conditions will change enough in the next month or two such that it would be safe to allow in-person learning, even if it's hybrid, sometime this semester? Is it possible?
I'm optimistic, to be honest. You know, I think the producers over there tease me or get mad at me for always being negative, but I'm optimistic. And I think that, you know, given how rates are going and the waiver process, I think some schools are in a county where they might be able to apply for it. They may have the resources to do it. And we could see some type of hybrid model, if not elementary schools being able to actually go forward with it. And if they're actually going through the entire waiver process, I think we would actually be in a safe situation. Again, though, I think I have to stress, people should be prepared for the possibility that schools may go back to in-person learning and they might be asked to shut down. There may be exposure, kids may have to stay home, and that could all go backwards, which the ability to trigger a shutdown for a school is also part of the waiver process. They thought of everything.
That is somewhat reassuring. Okay, Dr. Patel, we're going to take a short break on the air. When we come back, we want to talk about the latest on vaccines. But during break, let's talk about the risk to colleges. Join us over on our live streams. All right, we are here with our favorite special correspondent. In fact, Dr. Patel, I think you're the only person with that title. Special correspondent.
I
It is
love
confirmed.
I'm also the only person who's live right now with the sun moving on me, and I'm moving forward.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Can he make an appearance? No, that's okay. Oh, the sun. Yes. Okay. So let me ask you this. Okay. We want to talk about colleges because that's the focus of our town hall coming up at 4:30 that my colleague Leanne and I will be hosting. And we want to talk about the particular risk to that particular group because of their living environment on campus and also at that age group. So can you tell us in the college setting for the kids who choose to go back to campus, even if their classes are held remotely, but they're living in that dorm environment, what would you say they need to watch out for?
Everything. So colleges are a really tricky situation because of how many shared spaces there are. And every college, again, is different with respect to their layout. And so, if I were a freshman right now, first of all, I would want to get the college experience, which I feel for everyone that's not able to do that. I would look at your specific college, look at the physical distancing, look at how they've set things up. Are they allowing every dorm room to be occupied right now? What's happening in the cafeteria, in lecture halls? Are there sanitation stations? I've heard things about colleges creating one-way paths also throughout campus. So I think there's a lot of factors to consider. Also, colleges' local communities have to be prepared as well. The college health campus, the health clinic, they have to have adequate testing and contact tracing also in place. So there are a lot of things that colleges have to take in mind. It gives me anxiety just talking about it.
I know, right? All right. Hey, Sally Costa wants to know how much antibody testing is being done right now.
Sally, I don't know if I have a quantified number to talk about the amount of antibody testing happening. There's still a good amount that's going on out there. I think the more important thing that we need to think about now is what do we know about the specific antibody testing? What do we know about how long immunity is actually going to last? And one thing that the recent studies have told us is that the antibodies from natural infections are going down by half at about 3 months.
We're coming back on TV, so I'm going to put you on pause right there.
Yeah.
All right, we're back with our special correspondent, Dr. Alok Patel, answering our questions. I want to shoot a couple of our Instagram. Is that you? Okay.
That was me. It's not going to be any more.
That was live TV. All right, audio off. From Instagram, Kimberly wants to know, do you know why daycares and preschools are open, but elementary schools cannot, minus a waiver?
I don't actually know a policy answer of why that is. I think it honestly depends on where the daycare or preschool is, the size of the daycare or preschool, and potentially what their setup looks like. It's possible that there's a little bit more control if it's a smaller group. I think it'd be a little bit more difficult to make a generalization because there's so many different types of daycares. I also don't know if that means commercial daycare versus home daycare. I don't really have a great answer to that, but I would say for daycares and preschools, I do hope that they are following the same types of precautions that you'll see in the waiver process.
All right. This week we've also been reporting on the fact that California seems to be having technical issues with COVID-19 reporting. How does that happen? And I guess, we heard that our cases, our hospitalizations, ICUs are all down, but can we trust those figures?
From what I've heard, we can trust the figures when it comes to hospitalization rates. However, things about the case positivity rates might be in question because what was reported was kind of a delay in the electronic reporting of the tests. And so why that happened, I don't have a great answer for why that happened. I wish I was a computer engineer. It is a little frustrating because, it just shows us that rates are getting delayed. We know that death rates, unfortunately, have a delay in reporting as well. So that normally would have a little bit of a lag compared to the positivity rates, but it's unfortunately possible 7 days from now that decrease in positivity rates we heard from Governor Newsom may not hold true. We just have to wait. But the other delay that we're seeing right now is we saw the huge backlog in testing, 10 to 14 days in some places in the States.
Oh, yeah, trust me. Just getting an appointment is hard enough. And then there's the wait for the results, right? Okay, Trim Win Duong wants to know on Facebook, Dr. Patel, when flu season hits, how will we be able to distinguish COVID with this season's flu?
I dread the day when flu season hits right now. One thing that we'll be able to tell is some slight differences in symptoms that your doctor will be able to kind of sort out. There's also the thing with exposure, but also we have a rapid test for influenza. And that's going to be something that's very key for anyone who might have an exposure to be able to differentiate between. Hopefully, we'll have more rapid coronavirus testing available as well. So it'll be just like getting a flu test, But this allows me a chance to say, please, everyone, get your flu shot when it becomes available. The last thing we want to do is have both surges happening at the exact same time.
And you said the V word, vaccines, which leads me to what I really want to talk about, because there are hundreds of candidates in the works right now, right? And they're at varying stages. But that's a lot more at this stage of the game than, other things we've confronted. So I got to ask you, does this make you optimistic that we will have something soon? And if so, how soon? And when I say something, I mean FDA approved, which means it's safe and effective.
Right. Well, hey, no pun intended, but this just means more shots on goal. And, the more vaccines that are out there, the higher chance we have of having one that's safe, effective, and truly works. Now, we have 6 right now that are in phase 3 trials, which is breakneck speed. And that's great. We're with less than a year right now. And some of these companies have said they'll have an effective vaccine by the end of the year. That doesn't necessarily mean widespread distribution. And so if a vaccine actually goes through phase 3 trials, meaning it's not only safe and effective, it protects you more than if you didn't have the vaccine, that could come out by the end of the year, but we won't see hundreds of millions of doses until way later. Now, Novavax is another vaccine that produced trials from phase 1 earlier this week, showing a great result as well. So we're seeing more and more candidates come out with optimism. And I would tell people, unfortunately, for the next year or so, the vaccine is not the silver bullet. We can't let our guard down with hopes that a vaccine is going to come out immediately and save everything. We still have to keep all our strategies in place, all the behavior modifications, and then hopefully the vaccine shows up, we get to herd immunity, and we will get to some type of normalcy.
All right, so what percentage of the population needs to be inoculated before we can manage COVID?
Well, if you're referring to herd immunity, the estimate right now is probably around 60 to 70%. And, if you look at our estimates, we feel like we're undercounting the amount of people who have had coronavirus in the United States. But just for argument's sake, let's say that 10%, I'm just throwing it out there. Let's say that 10% of our country at some point is going to get this. Look at the sheer amount of deaths we've had. We need to get to 70%. And it would be completely disastrous and unsafe to try to get there naturally, as opposed to getting there from a vaccine. And some of the vaccines also are providing a better antibody response than the natural infection. And so, to get to that herd immunity level, we really do need a vaccine.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that the producer sometimes goes, hey, Dr. Patel, don't be so negative. You're scaring people. I'm about to take that moniker from you, okay, scarer in chief, because I've been wondering this morning over my coffee. I don't know why it hit me. I'm wondering, can this virus kind of lie dormant like shingles and then flare up in you like decades later?
Well, we're not decades later for me to be able to tell you that. But, one misnomer is thinking that only severe cases of coronavirus are debilitating, because there are reports of people who had what was classified as mild to moderate symptoms that lasted for 2-3 months. And they still had fatigue. They still had headaches. They still had a whole assortment of symptoms. So there are some scientists and doctors out there who theorize that the virus may be able to lie dormant and kind of reinfect people, or perhaps it just has a longer, slow phase of lingering. And then some people have even made the speculation that it could lie dormant and reinfect you, because people were testing positive, thinking they were recovering, and then they test positive again. And it's not that they got reinfected, it's that they had the same virus. It just kind of hung out in their body. So we really don't know, but unfortunately right now, everything could be a possibility.
All right, we have 30 seconds, but I have 2 questions I must get to, so we'll make them fast. Robert wants to know, can it be transmitted through drinking water, yes or no?
I don't believe it can be transmitted through the actual water. I'm not sure how long it's going to survive in flowing water, but it's from the container you're drinking from, absolutely.
Okay, Tracy wants to know, Dr. Patel, would you get a vaccination if it was ready in December or January?
Absolutely. I'd be first in line.
All
And
right.
assuming that it's been FDA approved,
Right,
which if it was available, it would be. I'm not going to take an experimental one that I found like in the alley.
And
but
there's
an
no
FDA approved one.
Yeah, there's no reason to not trust the FDA on that just because they are moving at a faster speed than usual?
Well, right now, people should have even more confidence in the vaccine approval process, because you're seeing how many steps it really takes to get it to market.
Okay. Dr. Alok Patel, always great talking with you. Good insight, and don't worry, you didn't scare people more than they needed to be scared, just the right amount of scare.
I did a lot of smiling today.
You really did. All right. And wear your mask, right? Thank you so much.
And wear your mask.
Absolutely. All right, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, the president of CSU East Bay joins me to talk about what it'll take to reopen colleges safely. We're taking a short break on the air. Conversation continues on our live streams. All right, Facebook friends, thank you for watching today. Dr. Patel with some great answers and new insight into some of these questions that we're all wondering about as we look at the situation with schools opening, vaccine in the works, lots of promising news, but nothing concrete yet. But we're getting close. But as he cautioned, even if you get an FDA-approved drug by the end of the year or vaccine, it will take a while for it to roll out and roll out enough to enough people that you get to that 70% herd immunity, enough people inoculated either through the inoculation or, having been exposed that they have that immunity. And Dr. Fauci had also mentioned that it could be even higher than 70%. So we don't know for sure. That's kind of where the break is usually. So we'll see. There's a lot that we still don't know about COVID-19. But our next guest is the president of CSU East Bay and Hayward, Dr. Leroy Morishita. And I hope I pronounced that correctly. Dr. Morishita, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Kristen.
Thank you for joining me today. I know it's on short notice. I do appreciate it. Are you ready for the start of a new school year?
Well, I think we're as ready as we can be at this point in time, given the circumstances.
Yeah, no, the circumstances are. How long have you been in that position, that role?
So a little bit over 9 years now.
Okay. This is, I can imagine, the most challenging year coming up. All right, folks, we're going to hang on tight for about 20 seconds because we're coming back on air. So shoot your questions with regard to CSU East Bay. Perhaps your child goes there, or you're thinking of attending there, or you go to another higher education college CSU system and you have some general questions. Feel free to put it out on Facebook and I'll try to get to it. And welcome back. ABC7's effort to build a better Bay Area includes taking an in-depth look at education. We've been doing that all week. Today, we're focusing on colleges. Joining us now to talk about the challenges facing his campus and higher ed is Cal State East Bay President Leroy Morishita. Dr. Morishita, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
I got to ask you, fall semester, I think, for you guys starts on August 24th. Are you ready?
Actually, August 18th will be our first day of classes.
Oh, okay.
So,
I got to ask you, how are you starting? Because like most universities in California, you're starting basically remotely. That's what I read. And you guys made that decision pretty early on. And that makes sense, especially given Alameda County is now on the watch list. But according to a memo I saw this week, it seems like you will have some sections that will be taught face-to-face. Am I right?
Yes, you are correct. We'll teach about 95% of our sections online, and about 5% will be in person. And that's about 123 sections that we'll be teaching in person.
Why do those particular ones in person? What's the nature of those, and why do they need to be in person?
A number of those are our lab classes in the sciences, and they need to have more of a hands-on experience that is really very, very difficult, if not impossible, to do remotely. And so those are lab classes. Some of them are actually music instrumentation classes. Besides those lab classes, some nursing classes that they work with simulators, and those need to be kind of observed and people to see how they respond to those simulations.
Got it. So two questions. One, how are you ensuring safety in those particular classes? What lengths are you going to? And two, what if the student doesn't feel comfortable?
So first, what we've done is we've worked with our risk management, our facilities people, the deans, the faculty members, to really provide for the kind of cleanliness and care in terms of those classes, that will make sure that people are wearing, if appropriate, PPE equipment, and to have those things, and making distance and face coverings, and to really take all kinds of precautions that are necessary to do that. So we've done those in those classes. In the others, they'll be socially distanced, 6 feet apart at least, and so that we'll take care of those kinds of situations in that way. As far as students that might feel uncomfortable, they can go learn online, and we're willing to do that. But these, for the quality and to provide the type of opportunity we thought that face-to-face would be the best for those sections.
Are your instructors, professors required to teach from campus, or can they teach from home?
No, they could teach from home. If they want to, because they feel more comfortable or because of the connectivity is better, they can teach from their offices, but otherwise they could teach from home.
Can you talk about what kind of changes you've made to the dorms to try to make them safer? Because I know you've made them less dense, but I understand that some students can be housed on campus, right?
Sure. We're going to only house probably about less than a quarter of the normal number of students that we have. We're going to house somewhere around 325 students, normally having about 1,500, 1,600 students on campus. And so to really provide for the safety for those students, they are going to have their own bedroom and their own bathroom. So they will not be sharing either a bedroom or a bathroom with another student. So we believe that is going to help a lot in terms of keeping distance and really having them follow all the protocols, right, in terms of the distance, wearing a face covering. Food service will be on a takeout basis, so they'll let them know what kind of food they want. It'll be prepared and set aside for them, and they'll pick it up.
So grab and go, less contact. With the dorm limitation and capacity, though, does that mean you can only house freshmen?
No, we are open to continuing students as well as freshmen. So we really had a full plate of students who had applied and were ready to live in housing. We really put out a questionnaire in terms of what kind of conditions that really required them to live on campus. And so in some cases, it might be former foster youth who have no place else to live. Some students that might have some homeless issues that really want to live on campus. Others that felt uncomfortable for their family's safety, that and as well as their ability to study in their homes, that they would like to live in on-campus housing.
So, President Morishita, I'm wondering, are you facing a financial crisis like so many other schools we've been reading about? And if so, you know, what does that translate into in terms of cutbacks, things like that?
Yes, so there's multiple revenue sources. Our normal operating budget, half of it is dollars coming from the state of California. The other half is tuition that students pay. So the system has been cut by 10% of its general fund support, the whole CSU. So that's translated to us to have a 10% cut in our general fund support. And on our revenue side of student fees, some of the enrollment might be dropping a little bit. So we're going to lose some revenue there. So there'll be a compounded part of that. And then outside of the general fund and the state support are fees that cover and the businesses that cover our housing.
Yeah. So President Morishita, can we wrap up this conversation over on our live streams, because we do want to take a short break on the air, but I'll give you a chance to finish that answer. Join us on our live streams right now. All right, sorry about that. It's a two-part answer, one on air and one on Facebook. But I do wonder, what does that mean, though? And I know you're not hit as hard as the private schools due to the state funding, but it is coming down a little bit in terms of the level. And as you mentioned, the tuition and fees, too. So what does that mean? Will there be fewer classes? Are you going to have to ask professors to take early retirement? What's going to happen?
So what we've done is we have tried to offer all the sections needed that our students demand. So we are providing all the sections necessary. What we're going to have to do is cut about 10% of our budget. And so part of that's going to be in terms of really looking at our personnel, because people make up 80% of our operating budget. 12% are mandatory costs, so we really only have 8% discretionary. So that could be considered discretionary, those supplies and services, phone, travel, things like that. So we're going to have to look carefully at our budget. We did get some CARES Act money from the federal government that could help us a bit. We do have some reserves, a limited amount, but it's going to be a long-term plan. So we're looking at using some of those reserves that we have, maybe up to half of it this year, and the rest in the next 2 years, because we believe it's going to be a 3-year problem.
All right. Well, President Morishita, I got to say, I want to get a little bit personal now. Don't worry, not that personal, but you should have retired by now, right? You should have been enjoying your retirement, but COVID changed that. Is that right?
Yes. I was supposed to retire on June 30th, and then I was going to go to the Tokyo Olympics. And I should be in Japan right now for the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah. Did they just ask you to stay on an extra year to kind of shepherd the school through because you've been there a long time?
Yes, my chancellor, my boss, the chancellor of the CSU, Tim White, he had called me and asked me whether I would stay at least through the end of this calendar year, just to get us through this, because it'd be so difficult for somebody new to come in.
All right,
and to really be able to move forward.
Thank you so very much. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much.
All right, that's going to do it for now. But at 4:30, my colleague Leanne Melendez, our education reporter, and I will be hosting a town hall in which we continue to talk about the challenges facing Bay Area colleges and beyond with COVID and kids going back to class. Thank you for joining us for this interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Take care. All right. Thank you, Facebook friends. Always appreciate your company.